Now, coming up, as Commonwealth leaders gather in Sri Lanka today amid controversy over human rights, should we still stand united as a group of nations?
After daybreak, every year thousands of British tourists head to Sri Lanka, but there's a darker side to the place.
David Cameron demanded an urgent investigation into alleged war crimes as he arrived for a Commonwealth meeting that got underway in the last few hours.
Yeah, the Commonwealth dates back more than half a century, but with serious concerns. How united is it now? With roots going back to the British Empire, the Commonwealth includes some of the world's largest, smallest, richest and poorest countries, spanning 5 out of the 7 continents, with a population totalling more than 2 billion. Its aim to work together on important issues such as business, health and the fight against poverty, with sport, of course, topping the agenda next year as the Commonwealth Games come to Glasgow. Today, Prince Charles and David Cameron will meet other member states to discuss matters of mutual interest. But do we really have that much in common? 41 out of the 53 states still treat homosexuality as a crime, even punishable by death in some nations. After the boycott of Mauritian, Canadian and Indian Prime Ministers in protest against alleged Sri Lankan war crimes, is the monarch enough to unite a Commonwealth that is so strongly divided? Well, we're joined by comedian Stephen K. Amos and UKIP leader Nigel Farage. Good to see both of you. Huge controversy over the fact that this event is being held in Sri Lanka in the first place. Can you understand why people are upset?
Absolutely, I can understand why people are upset, because the human rights atrocities that we've been talking about, you know, people are affected. It affects people on a daily basis. And the fact that it's under the umbrella of the Commonwealth, I mean, is it really relevant anymore, bearing in mind how different the societies and countries are?
Well, go on then, is it?
It's always very different. I mean, you know...
how relevant is it?
Well, exactly. I don't know. Is it relevant anymore? I mean, it harks back to a bygone era, you know, of the Commonwealth, all united. But I think he was right to go, Cameron, because if you're there, you can make a change. You at least can say something. Because if you don't turn up and you boycott, what are you saying? You know...
Sorry, no, I didn't mean to stop you. It distracts my breathing. Gosh, if only I had that power all the time with people. That's marvellous. But that won't work with Nigel. Nigel, so who pays for the Commonwealth? Are we all paying for it? Because there's
we do, but it's a tiny secretariat.
It hasn't got any power, though,
it doesn't cost very much money, but I believe it's actually one of the most underused potential clubs in the world, and I'll tell you why. It isn't a relic of empire, it's become something modern and new. And there are actually African countries who were never part of the British Empire who are considering joining it. So people do see it as having some value. And it's got some things that it shares. English language, common law, a shared sense of history. And I think we underuse it massively. I quite accept that there are different values.
What do we use it for, Nigel?
Well, let me explain.
OK.
Let me explain. 2 billion people live within those Commonwealth countries. Some of those countries are the most dynamic, booming global economies in the world. And what I would like to see is the Commonwealth turned into something that would be a free trade club. And that would not just benefit the rich, it would help Black Africa to sell its agricultural produce to countries like ours without the massive tariffs that the EU puts on their products.
So what about human rights? Like on a basic level, for example, Cameron, we saw the same-sex legislation being passed earlier this year. Out of all the countries of the Commonwealth, I think 42 countries, being homosexual is punishable by death.
Well, we can argue that, but let's just remember, we do business with China, who execute thousands of people every year. Oxford Street is full of trendy, fashionable clothes built through child slave labour over other parts of the world. You know, don't just single out the Commonwealth countries for not having the same values that we have.
But surely homosexuality should be on the agenda to start with in this meeting.
Well, I think the fact that 1 or 2 of those countries have the death penalty for it clearly should be on the agenda.
But also, because we're talking about the Commonwealth, that's why it's relevant.
If a country chooses to have different laws on homosexuality, frankly, that's up to them. And as I say, there are many other human rights abuses going on all over the world. And sure, you know, what's happened in Sri Lanka, you know, a 30-year civil war in which tens of thousands of people died, it did end brutally. But there are many that would say that actually what Tony Blair and George Bush did in Iraq wasn't much better.
Well, Stephen, I mean, there is a point, not necessarily the last bit of what Nigel said, but that we do, as a country, sit down with many other countries that have very dubious human rights records.
Well, absolutely, and not that I'm saying that's right either, but what you have to do is you have to make a stance somewhere. You've got to begin somewhere. You can't just say, because we've got great trade between us, we'll ignore the rules of your land. That sounds ridiculous. We should be able to protest and say, what you're doing is not fair on a basic human right level.
Street about China, then?
But we do have some influence, don't we? And, you know, the Queen is the head of this organisation. It's quite right, but David Cameron has gone, and you know, he can say his thing there in Sri Lanka, but we do have influence, and we should try and use that influence.
Absolutely. If the influence is used, it's a positive thing.
Well, let's see, shall we? Yes.
Thank you.
Good to see you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.